Ever since I started writing Trophy Braid back in January, I've always just kind of operated with the assumption that I was going to self-publish my books. I've never written a novel before, I don't really have perfect prose, and there's an experience that you get from doing a thing that I just didn't have. So I assumed that my first few efforts would not be up to snuff in order to actually get them traditionally published. Fast forward a few months, and what was novel has become novels. What was historical fiction has now become fantasy. So the Twitter pitching contest, SFF Pit, rolled around, and I thought, why not participate in it? I don't expect to get any bites, I don't know what I'm doing, but the practice of learning how to pitch your novel in a single line, the elevator pitch as they call it, practicing doing that and seeing what the response is, that's a really useful exercise. I'm going to have to sell and market this book. I could use the practice. So I went ahead and participated, even though I didn't really expect that I would be traditionally publishing a book. The thing is, I actually got a few agent responses, and that kind of got me thinking, like, okay, if as unpracticed as I am, people are still interested, maybe I actually have something here. Maybe it's more than just a first effort. Maybe I can find somebody to help me make this into a real thing. And it was always going to be a real book. I was going to go through the effort of professionally publishing it, like making it nice, hiring right cover art, hiring proper editors, and things like that. I always planned on doing all of that. But if I can find somebody with more experience than me to sort of guide me through the process and get me with somebody who can actually make it, like, right, why not? So now I think I might actually go through the process of trying to query Trophy Braid. And for those of you who are not familiar with the publishing industry, when you start sending out queries, that's you looking for a literary agent, right? So you put your pitch out there, kind of like sending in a resume. It's a letter and a portion of your manuscript. And then the literary agent lets you know if it's a book that they're willing to represent. And generally, they receive hundreds, if not thousands, in a month. And it takes a long time for them to get to all of them. Sometimes you don't get a response at all. And when you do, it's generally a form letter. So it's very much like applying to jobs, except for it's you and several thousand other candidates all applying for the same job. So knowing that that's my odds, and knowing that this is my debut novel and I've never published anything before, I've given myself 6 months to see if I can make it happen. What I will consider making it happen is requests for the full manuscript. That will tell me that my pitch and my query is up to snuff and good enough to get somebody's attention. If I get requests for the full manuscript and I don't get an offer of representation, that tells me Trophy Braid isn't where it needs to be in order to have somebody represent the book. Then, after being able to gauge agent interest, I'll either work my way through Trophy Braid again, potentially hire an editor to get it cleaned up the way that it needs to be so that I can find representation, or I'll just go back to the original plan, which was self-publishing the novel and what I intended to do all along. So I don't really feel like I'm losing anything since I had already planned to put in all that effort. And like I always do, we're not going into this without a plan. So I've kind of devised a plan of action for myself. But before we get going on that, if you would please take a moment to hit the like button on the video and subscribe to the channel. Things like that really help me out. So if you've already done it, thank you so much for taking the time. So step 1 to entering the query trenches, as they call them, is to finish your novel, which I did in March. Step 2, get the manuscript as clean as possible before you query, and I think I've done that. In addition to doing several rounds of editing on my own, I've had a few friends look over it and kind of help me work out some of the kinks in the story. So I feel like what I have right now is a cohesive plot, characters that are interesting and believable, and a story structure that actually makes sense and is logical from start to finish. Step 3 is craft the right query letter. Like I said, sending query letters is kind of like sending a job application to a job that you and thousands of other people are applying to, which means your letter really needs to stand out. Not only does it need to be well written, it also needs to be catered to the person you're writing it to. Just like you query a resume to the job that you're applying to, your query letter needs to be catered to the agent that you're pitching it to. So for example, when I found an agent that was specifically looking for high stakes fantasy set in a dangerous and harsh environment, of course that's Trophy Braid, but she's not gonna know that unless I tell her. So I made sure when I sent the letter to that agent that I mentioned specifically those aspects of the story, because that's what's going to speak to her. There were 4 YouTube channels in particular that I found incredibly helpful when I was working on crafting my query letter. Alyssa Matesic has a whole series on query letters and how to write them, how not to write them, what to expect once you've sent them, how to follow up on them. She just goes into a lot of detail. She used to work for 2 of the big 5 publishers, and so I found her videos really informative. Ellen Brock gave not only a step-by-step process for constructing a query letter, you put in a little blurb about your book, you know, a couple paragraphs. And that part in particular for me is the most difficult. Summarizing an entire novel in just a few sentences is a really tricky thing to do, and Ellen Brock did a great job of helping you work through that process. Speaking of blurbs, Michelle Schusterman had a formula that was literally plug and play, like an old algebra formula from school. So obviously you have to craft the sentences once you put it in there, but it really helped sort of punch down and focus in and distill the essence of what needs to be included in that blurb to make it as clean and crisp as possible. And finally, there's Becca Day, who is an author who successfully queried her first novel. And she shared her own query letter. Actually, come to think of it, Will Dean did that too, and they sort of broke down the elements and why they included what they did. They kind of picked out the parts that they included that maybe they would have done a little differently in hindsight, but their letters worked, and they actually shared them with us so that we could see, like, okay, this is kind of what a full query letter looks like, and it's not a form, it's the actual letter they used. So, like I said, Becca Day and Will Dean both did that. So I've already written the letter. I've actually already sent it out to a couple of agents who requested it from SFF Pitt. And I'm pretty happy with it. I hope it's effective, but until I've used it a few times, there's not really any way to tell. So if it turns out that it works, I will share it with you guys. And if it doesn't, I'll share that too. And maybe we can go over, you know, what parts I'm changing and why I'm changing them. Step 4 in the query process is find the right agents. You don't want to just send your novel to anyone. If somebody only reps, you know, children's books, sending them my dark epic fantasy isn't going to do either of us any good. It's wasting their time, it's wasting my time. So you got to make sure that you're getting it in front of agents who not only are looking for your type of book, but are actually open to being queried. Not all agents accept new manuscripts all the time. Sometimes they're full up. They have all the clients that they can reasonably represent with the time that they have allowed to do their job. So I'll be using both Twitter and Query Tracker to kind of help narrow down the field and figure out who specifically is the best person for me to spend my energy on. I feel like there's more to finding the right agent than just finding an agent willing to represent your book. This is somebody you're going to be working with for a long time, potentially years, potentially your career, as long as they're doing it and as long as you're doing it and you're writing in the same genre. So you want to make sure that you're on the same page about how this process goes. If you're really hungry and really forward and really persistent and really aggressive, working with an agent who's a little more laid back would probably drive you crazy, and that's kind of the situation I'm in. So you need to find somebody that you can get along with professionally for a long time, and that may mean querying agents that might be a good fit for the book, but aren't necessarily a good fit for me and my personality. Step number 5 is preparing for the worst. They're called the querying trenches for a reason. It is an absolutely brutal process. And while I'm not particularly prone to feeling sad or getting depressed after rejection, like, even the thickest skin is going to take a beating when rejections are coming one after another and you're being absolutely bombarded with no's. So one of the ways I'm prepping myself to sort of ahead of the curve deal with this overwhelming tide of rejection that is coming my way here in the next few weeks, I'm watching a lot of videos by other authors who have gone through this process, sort of helping myself by watching what they went through so I know what to expect. In addition, I found several authors on Twitter who have shared their experience. Here's what the letter looked like or the email looked like that I got back. That YouTuber, Alyssa Matesic, that I mentioned earlier, who'd worked for publishing companies, she actually has a few videos where she goes through agent rejections and sort of the kinds of language that they use in form letter and what each of them might mean so that you can actually improve your query and improve your manuscript. And I found that really helpful. So I've also spent quite a bit of time looking over that sort of thing. In addition to all that mechanical prep, if you will, or practical prep, I'm also making sure that I set aside time to spend with my family and doing things I love. Things that bring me joy and disconnect me from the book world, like playing out in my garden and working with my animals, spending time playing games with my family and just kind of unplugging and goofing off, playing video games on stream with some friends. Those sorts of things will hopefully help keep me grounded and make it feel like it's not the end of the world. Step 5 is just submit the queries. That's not something you want to do all at once because, like I said, each letter needs to be crafted to the agent that you're sending it to. So I plan on trying to send an average of 1 query per day. Now that doesn't mean I'm going to send a query every day. I might send them, do research for 2 or 3 days and then send 3 at a time. But that's the pace that I want to kind of keep up. So in addition to using Query Tracker, which is a really useful tool, but kind of a clunky website, I've also got myself a spreadsheet, which is the way that my brain works and hopefully will help me keep track of everything. So that's the plan, and I don't know if any of this is gonna work, but I will share my progress with you as I get it. I don't expect that I'll have an update probably for another month, maybe 2. Querying is a long, slow, painful process, and like I said, I expect to get a lot of rejections, but I think that even those are valuable, in particular if they come with feedback. So even if it's a form letter, the form letter that they choose to use will kind of help me understand, like, oh, you picked the wrong agent, or oh, your query letter isn't quite as clean as it should be, or oh, your manuscript isn't as polished as it should be. So we'll have to kind of see what kind of feedback we get and sort of tweak and adjust our approach as we go. So hopefully you come along for the ride. And we'll see how we do. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and of course if you like the way that I present information, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell down below. You can find all of my social media contacts in the description, and of course if you want to keep up with me and the progress I'm making on my current novel, you can do that at effywritesbooks.com. Thank you so much for watching, have an excellent day, and I'll see you next time.